Kimmy. Hey, sweetheart. Hey. Oh, yeah? That's what she said. Well, if you say so, I don't know. Welcome to another Mythicals with your Auntie Elaine. Gonna explain stuff to you. Isn't that nice of me? I'm gonna do a little bit of explaining today about terms that you may see in various parts of the mythical communities out there. If Kimmy will let me do that. I'm sorry, I think it's not the time for the rainbow unicorn. Rainbow unicorn is just gonna have to wait till later. Come here, you. I don't think this is gonna work. You're too wiggly. Mommy does love you, oh baby girl. Go play. Go play. You've got the whole backyard. Okay, let's see here. Right, sit. Here you go. Casey, come get your soft treat. Good boy. Yeah. So, terminology in the mythical community is pretty important. And you can pick it up just kind of passively if you just go and read a lot of posts in any sort of forum or Facebook group, you know, follow any Twitter tags, whatever. The thing is, you know, it's nice to have a little jump on it. So let's get into it a little bit. Now, the first term that I wanted to talk about is the acronym. You know, the big one, LGBT, that you see a lot of places, most places, when they're talking about the queer community, the gay community, gay rights community, blah, 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 you know, whatever you want to call that. You know, and the interesting thing about that is it was very deliberately selected to be LGBT in the late 80s to make sure that all of those groups were given equal respect within the community. So even like back in the late 80s, before the terms that, you know, I use a lot in Mythicals discussions, like Aromantic, asexual, you know, genderqueer, any of that didn't exist back then. They didn't, I mean, people existed that were like that, but they didn't have a word for it yet. And so, you know, they included everyone they had a word for, is the way I look at it. But, you know, so when you're talking about that broader community, it can be a little bit dicey because, you know, we're not in the acronym, you know. And so, you know, of course they did later on, people started using LGBTQIA to include questioning / queer people, intersex people, and aromantic, asexual, and agender people. Kimmy, this is not a good time for fly hunting. Sit. Mwah. Sweet girl. Anyway. Hey, you made me lose my train of thought entirely. I'm going to have to give up on her, but she's so cute. It's really hard. The broader acronym. You want the rainbow unicorn. All right. Well, don't squeak it. She's going to squeak it immediately. I want to put her inside. All right. Let's try this again. Anyway, the next one. Oh, Millie. Is that so? Oh, all right. Millie says we had to take a break. Goodness gracious. Things they don't tell you when you become a dog mom. Huh. Anyway, so the broader acronym LGBTQIA, you know, it's a little bit of a mouthful. So there's a lot of other things that people might use. One of the more controversial is the term queer. I personally like that term because I feel it's very inclusive. I don't have any discomfort with the term, feeling like it was a slur. Uh, I guess that's just maybe from my background. Um, so I personally would say I'm queer and say the queer community, but not every person who, could claim that term feels comfortable doing so because it does have a history of being used as a slur. The only problem is there's very few terms that mean gay or not straight or whatever that don't have some negative connotations because of the way that all the allosexual, alloromantic people have treated the mythicals in the past. And now, if we're going to talk about the queer community or the rainbow community or the LGBTQIA plus community, we also have to be able to talk about people who are not part of that community. And so there's terms that we use for that. Obviously, straight would be the most commonly used term, and people are also often cisgender. And then if they are also not asexual, then we would say they're allosexual. And if they're not aromantic, we would say they are alloromantic. So if you are a heterosexual, alloromantic, allosexual, cisgender person, then you are in the majority. And of course, obviously, all those terms can be, used in combination with other things. Often trans people are allosexual and heterosexual, and sometimes you'll have people who are bisexual but only heteroromantic allosexual people. All sorts of different combinations are possible. And so usually, though, people don't use the term to describe themselves because I don't see it used very much outside of the sort of smaller communities, the ace community, the aerospace community. But it's a term that we use when we want to say people who are not, part of our identity group. And it's important to have a shorthand for that. It's not anything derogatory at all. It's a completely neutral term. It's just something used to describe people who don't fit a label. And so that makes it different because it's not something that is chosen or a self-identified label. It's simply a descriptor. And I think that can be a little bit challenging for people that aren't used to being labeled or who are used to being the default. And so when somebody comes up with a term to codify the default, I think that kind of like blows their mind a little bit. But which is why you see some people react the way they do to the term cisgender. Cisgender is a neutral term. It is not an insult, it's not derogatory, it's just a way for people to describe people who feel comfortable in the gender they were assigned at birth. So, I'm cisgender and I'm perfectly fine owning that term, but I wouldn't have to self-identify as cisgender. I would have to self-identify if I wasn't cisgender. So I guess that's a little bit strange, but I guess that's the way it works right now. And I think that's something that'll change. And the idea that there's a default is certainly being questioned significantly by the generation after mine. So we'll see what they do with that. And we also have a very important term for the aromantics among us, which is the term QPR. That stands for queer platonic relationship, which is essentially a relationship that is extremely close, but is not romantic, but isn't really accurately described as a friendship either. Um, we shy away from, in the romantic community, saying that a romantic relationship is more than friends, because friendship is an extremely important part of our lives. Very few people who are aromantic are also aplatonic, although there are aplatonic people out there that don't have platonic attraction towards other people too, but most people I know of that are aromantic, you know, they have close platonic relationships, at least a few. And so, but a queer platonic relationship is something that is more than that, but not better than that, better than friendship. I don't know. It's extremely difficult to describe. If you've been in one, you get it. If you want one, you get it. Otherwise, it kind of like, it makes people kind of cock their head and go, huh? I say, I claim that I was in one. We didn't use the terminology at the time. This was about 10 years ago. Actually, yeah, about 10 years ago, yeah. And so the person at the time, I would have just referred to her as my best friend. Now she is, I guess they've come out as genderqueer, so it's a little complicated how to speak about it. But I'll just use she for my description, just to kind of simplify things. I never had a sexual relationship with her. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with her sexuality, but it just wasn't like that. But we were as close as romantic partners would be in a lot of ways. I mean, she was polyamorous and at the time married, and so she had a primary romantic partner and then sometimes tertiary romantic partners, and so I don't think it was difficult for her to slot essentially a non-romantic romantic partner in. But we were together all the time. We traveled together. We got matching tattoos. When my QPR ended, which isn't to say that I'm not still friends with that person, they're still a part of my life, and no ill will there. Our circumstances just changed in so many ways, and when that happened, it was the most painful breakup of my life. I have dated. I tried really hard not to be a romantic. None of those breakups were ever as painful as this. And I've had close friendships that ended, and it was nothing like this. It was pretty devastating, and certainly the closest thing I've ever felt and may ever feel to what it's like for someone's significant other, husband, wife, to divorce them or to have a very long-term romantic relationship end. And the reason that I wanted to explain that is QPRs are really hard to explain, and unless you've been in one, it's just really hard to wrap your mind around what it is. And so I think sort of similarly to how it helped me understand how it felt for alloromantic people to have the end of a significant romantic relationship. If you can kind of understand, assuming you're alloromantic, which is probably not necessarily a fair assumption, but if you are alloromantic and you've had a relationship end, the way that I can understand that is through the lens of having my QPR end. And so maybe that might help you understand my QPR, because you can see how I relate that to your experience. I think that that's one thing that's definitely problematic in the mythical community, especially for those of us that are asexual, aromantic, aplatonic, because how do you explain to someone the absence of feeling something, you know? And that's why, in the absence of knowing the term aromantic, I didn't really understand it. But once I had a term for it, it made it easier for me to understand the concept that, you know, there's something that alloromantic people feel that I don't feel. And so I think that it makes it difficult for us to translate our experience to an alloromantic experience. And so that's why we end up with all of our little niche terms like QPRs and squishes. Squishes are sort of like the aromantic equivalent of a crush, but not really, because again, it's not a one-to-one translation. Another term that is important within the mythical community is gatekeeper. Now, it's not exclusive to us. Other people use the term gatekeeping or gatekeeper, but it happens an awful lot in our community. We'll run into aphobes, which would be people who discriminate against asexual people, and arophobes, people who discriminate against aro people, and you know, they'll sort of deny our place in the queer community, or that you know, that it, you know, is even real to be asexual or aromantic. Gatekeeping happens an awful lot to the bisexual community, where people think they're, you know, either straights playing around or gays who won't admit that they're gay, which is the weirdest thing in the world to me, because it's like harder to be bisexual than gay, so why do people think it's gay light? I don't get that. So gatekeeping is something that we run into a lot. All mythicals, you know, we get the people who want to doubt our existence because it's so far out of their understanding of existence and their existence that they'd rather we'd be gone. That's the erasure that we face. So, you know, mythicals, that's what makes us mythical, is that people want to erase us, want to say that we don't exist. And so that's why I use this term to refer to aromantics, asexuals, non-binary people, transgender people, bi people, pan people, omnisexual people, polyam people. All of us are told that we don't exist, that we don't feel what we feel or say we feel, and we're just trying to get attention, or, you know, we don't suffer enough, or whatever. And let me tell you something, we are. We just are. We exist. We are. We are not mythicals. But if you're going to call me that, I do think that it's a pretty fun term. And, you know, I like pretending I'm a mythical fairy princess or something. And so I'm going to use that term. And it's okay if other people are not comfortable with it. I'm going to call myself queer. And it's okay if other people are not comfortable with that. And I'm going to call myself asexual, aromantic, pan-oriented, and cisgender. And I don't care if anyone has any trouble with any of that, because it doesn't change the fact that that's who I am and how I feel. And on that note, I will leave you, and I hope you have just the most wonderful day ever. Auntie Elaine will see you soon. Bye.